Good evening and welcome to the May 27th Town Board Workshop and a continuation of the budget conversation. I know of one change to the agenda. Does anyone have any other changes or updates to the agenda?
No, move to approve the amended.
Okay, I would like to add item 3B, recognition in memory of Mayor Horace Johnson Sr. by North Carolina Representative Renee Price. Okay, so okay, all right, do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we will start with recognition. I have a proclamation to read. And Horace, I will come up here if you want to join me up here. Maybe somebody out there has a camera.
You guys don't mind the hat, we want to dance to.
Oh, no, you
Oh,
got it.
they do.
If you look down, when you.
Oh, thank you. Not as dapper as him, but I mean, it's in the DNA.
How about you stand over here? Good sign. Okay. So this is a proclamation honoring the life and legacy of Mayor Horace Johnson Sr. and with us tonight is Horace Johnson Jr. Whereas Horace Johnson Sr., Hillsboro's first Black mayor, dedicated public servant, passed away on May 15, 2025 at the age of 95. And whereas Johnson served on the Hillsboro Board of Commissioners from 1977 to 1989 and as mayor from 1989 to 2001, leading distinction during a pivotal time in the town's history. And whereas the Alabama native settled in Hillsboro in 1954, became a steadfast advocate for civil rights and equity, including efforts to strengthen segregation, to end segregation and support Black students during the school disruption of 1969. And whereas his legacy includes major contributions to Hillsboro, such as establishing affordable housing and expanding emergency water access, constructing key facilities including the town reservoir, police station, and community center, advocating for a meals tax to support tourism and easing truck traffic on Church Street, promoting sound fiscal management in town government, and whereas Johnson represented Hillsboro with distinction regionally and statewide, including service on the Triangle J Council of Governments, and was chair of the key public policy committee for the North Carolina League of Municipalities. And whereas this impact was recognized in 2017 with a Hillsboro Proclamation of Horace Johnson Day and a commemorative exhibit at the Orange County Historical Museum. Now, therefore, I, Mark Bell, on behalf of the Hillsboro Board of Commissioners, do hereby honor the life and legacy of former Mayor Horace Johnson Sr. and extend our deepest condolences to his family and all who know his passing.
Thank you, Bill.
Copy of the proclamation, and would you like to say anything to the board about your father?
Let me just say this about Dad. He was very active and made a lot of comments. He stood back and watched the town grow and from different things he liked, a lot he liked, a lot he didn't like. But one thing I can say today was thank you for the award, but it's really not necessary because all he really did for was for the people. He's always been a people person. The words and things that just came to him, he just put it over there. Because he always sit down and try to figure out what's next that I can do to help someone who's at a disadvantage. So on behalf of him, I will accept him and thank you again.
Thank you, Horace. And I'll invite Representative Price to come up.
We face. So. This letter is from my office to the family of Horace Johnson Sr. Time has come to celebrate the life of one truly remarkable individual, the Honorable Horace Johnson Sr., who completed his work in this world on 16 May 2025. He was a civil rights leader, a mentor, a family man, a politician, and a visionary. Mr. Horace, affectionately known by many, transformed his adopted hometown of Hillsboro, as well as Orange County, the Triangle region, and the state of North Carolina. Mr. Horace loved his community, and the people respected him. In 1989, he was elected the first African American mayor of the town of Hillsboro having served 12 years on the town board of commissioners. Mayor Johnson saw the potential of the small town and set it on a path to social, political, and economic growth and development. One of his outstanding characteristics was his belief in people. Mr. Horace had a penchant for guiding younger men and women into seeing their possibilities in life. He encouraged them to strive and achieve whatever their goals. And even though he became a renowned public figure, Mr. Horace cherished his family. Sharing a loved one with the broader community can be challenging, and indeed, I am grateful to you, family, for your sacrifices. While he no longer is with us physically, the Honorable Horace Johnson Sr. has bequeathed a legacy to those of us living and for the generations to come. May his bold and courageous spirit, now and henceforth, manifest in the work that we must do for the betterment and advancement of humankind. In remembrance with admiration.
Well, thank you, Representative Price. I would just like to say, this has been a tremendous journey. His dad, he does want kids, he always thought the best for them. When he integrated, was no democracy in the house, okay? And he decided to send me to the school to be the first to integrate, but it's now the physical was on the shooting high then. I was angry for a long time. But in hindsight, he was just beginning too. So both of us are named Horace. I'm Junior. He's going, he took me with him, and he knew that I would survive like he would. So on behalf of him, who he was a visionary, he saw that this town could be more than what it was then. And it's definitely changed for the better. I want to thank you. And this is part of his legacy that I will carry for the rest of my life. Thank you.
Thank you.
And moving on to item number 4, items for the consent agenda. Register the board.
Need to approve.
Matt,
Second.
thank you, Kathleen. All in favor? Any opposed? And we'll move on to our in-depth discussion of the fiscal year 2026 budget and workshop number 2. Budget Director Neil Bradford, lead that discussion.
Well, before we so tonight's meeting is kind of a continuation of discussions that were started at the first workshop on the 19th. And kind of a continuation of several topics that we kind of began that night. But before we dive into that, and there's been a lot of questions around the revenue neutral tax rate. And so we have this chart here that kind of looks at kind of how we provide some additional context and kind of how we stack up compared to others in our region. So this first chart looks at the cents increases over revenue neutral, and Hillsborough is there in the blue. And you can see then in the burgundy are revals that happened last year, and then the gold are revals or proposed rates for the current year.
And Emily, if I may interject and say that just for anybody who's watching this from home or watching recording it later, we've had the public hearing portion of the meeting, so we've gathered all the public input from stakeholders and residents and concerned citizens. And so tonight, we're some more internal discussion amongst the board on those issues.
Yeah, so you can see Hillsborough is proposing 5.7 cents over revenue neutral You can see sort of in our region, it ranges anywhere from 3.8 all the way up to 14 cents over revenue neutral.
I'm curious, above revenue neutral, looks like we're kind of in the middle of the pack, maybe slightly above or below middle. You probably don't have a slide for it, but you probably have the information somewhere. I'd be curious to see what the effective tax rate is rather than, just in context, like Night Gales, for example, 14 cents above revenue neutral for last fiscal year, but like, what is it now? Because I know some of them have lower tax rates than we do. So it'd be good, just as I hear comments from folks about, well, your tax rate is higher than they can carry, but not having a cheat sheet like this kind of leaves me a little astray. But of course, those folks could be taking into account they have a special district tax of some sort and county taxes as well. So it would be nice to also know what the tax rate is in addition to the increase above revenue neutral.
And we can definitely send these slides out afterwards. The next slide just has what that is, like percentage increase from the revenue neutral. So you can see that ranges anywhere from 8.9% to 46.7%, but within the PowerPoint, within the edit data, we had that in the table, so we can definitely send that out afterwards, but it has like what the proposed, and I know this is like super tiny, what the proposed rate is, so then you'll have that additional
Perfect.
context.
You're much better at Excel than I am. That'll be awesome. Thank you.
So again, it will send that out afterwards. Any questions? All right, well, first up is continuation of the fees and charges schedule discussions, and for that, I'm gonna turn it over to Matt.
Thanks, sir. So Shannon is also here to answer any questions you all may have about the detail fees and when I say them incorrectly. So we're gonna have a couple of interactive portions of tonight's workshop. And so this is the first where we'll actually go through, and if you want to make changes, we'll record them live and adjust them as we go. So for the planning specific fees, there were a number of suggested edits during the board meeting last time. And so we wanted to take an opportunity to make sure that we captured everything that was suggested to change and check in with the board, make sure you're all sort of consensus. And so this list of proposed changes are just the fees that were recommended for either a dollar amount change or a new charge. There was previously no charge. And where there was a specific dollar amount recommended that differed from staff's recommendation, we've noted that in this column here. Or if there was a change, just to say increase, we've left that there to note, we need to discuss and nail down what that number is. And so we can either go through these one by one, or if the board, if you all had an opportunity to look at this, if you have specific fees that you want to target and discuss, happy to do it that way. So, Mr. Mayor, I'll turn it over to you to sort of go around the horn.
Okay, thank you. So I see that you have provided some feedback on page 66 of the agenda regarding some of the fees that comes before the comparison chart here. And those two comments resonated with me. So I guess the thing to do would be to go around the horn for each of the proposed things that Commissioner Ferguson suggested. And then get just a show of hands if there's support for changing that or keeping it or rejecting.
Yes, sir. And any of the other fees that we didn't get to discuss last time, if there are any other recommended changes.
Okay, so maybe we'll start with Megan. On the third one, the after the fact zoning compliance permit, current fee is 200 and Kathleen has suggested 500.
I like that the 200 was added over 0 for 25, that's for sure. I'm a little hesitant of going all the way up to 500 since there wasn't a fee for it before, and we don't have an education plan in place. I think that's also what we talked about last time, was making sure that that everybody was educated on these fees. So I'm good with 200. I'm not sure how high if I'm willing to go to 500, but I'll listen to everybody else's comments on it and see if we can come up with a consensus.
Thank you. Rob, it's fair.
So similar to Megan, to me, 500 seems like a big jump from 0. I'm supportive of some increases, but I also like the staff comments about educating the public and providing kind of some moderate sort of increases. So I don't want to see anything double. So for example, I'm just throwing this out there, so when we go, if something's doubled, it's too much for me. So I'll leave it at that. 500 is too much for me for this one. I'm fine with 200.
I only have experience in terms of historic district commission and after the fact applications. And I always found that came in two forms. Someone who was new to town and didn't know and are apologetic and will, do what it takes to make it right, and others who knew it and did it anyway. So it's tough to have a sliding scale on kind of what was the willfulness of the violation. So your comments resonate with me. 200 seems reasonable for this after the fact kind of thing. Going to 500 that's too big of a jump. I'd like to graduate over time to see if it becomes a problem, if it's effective, and if an educational program. Matt.
I actually do concur with everything that everyone just said about the after the fact compliance permit. Especially since I would assume that this is the first year where we've had the contractor who's going out and doing code enforcement and other things. I assume that's working well, Shannon, worth its weight in gold.
It's been really, really helpful, and we've had a lot of things abated. After we get through this first 6 months, I'll probably come to you all after our summer break and talk a little bit about what's been abated and what's still kind of out there and trouble spots that we're seeing. But yes, it has been immensely helpful cleaning up things around town.
Are you finding through that process some after the fact things that?
Yeah, and also just, sorry, I'll get up. Also just, we've seen a lot of new construction and infill. And when they're trying to put a large house on a small lot, every inch counts. And you gotta measure twice or 10 times if that's what it takes and cut once. So we have had some challenging things that have come up with pools and decks and even entire structures that were placed just kind of where they shouldn't be. And that is just a ton of staff time to try and resolve. So really what we're just trying to capture here is the staff time that it takes to go out there, kind of look at what's on the survey, look at what's in the field, make sure that that looks right. If it doesn't, take the wheel out and actually measure it, and then work with the property owner to get it resolved, because that actually is kind of the time consuming part.
While you're here, since it's also covered about the after the fact, certificate of appropriateness, from 300 to 1,000. Would it? Why the difference between 200 for the zoning compliance permit, 300 for the historic district?
More often than not with the historic district, after the fact COAs, they have to go to the HDC. And again, it's just resolving staff, it's a staff time. So if you misplace a shed, you know, over your property line or whatever, the shed has to get moved. If you do an addition to a home in the district and you've used all or most incompatible materials and have to pull all those materials back off, potentially, it's a bigger ask in the district, just because the district is a little bit more strict than the general UDO.
And for the zoning compliance permit after the fact, is that, remind me, is that mostly staff driven versus having to come to the planning board? Or
Yeah, we can resolve a lot of those at staff level,
Versus-
unless they ask for a variance or something.
versus the historic district where they actually have to come to a meeting? And you have, not you, but a staff person.
A staff person, yeah,
Yeah.
has to sometimes involve the HDC.
I see the point in what Commissioner Ferguson wants to do, especially with the historic district, but also that's a huge job. And then also just knowing that there are folks who can easily pay the $1,000, but I'm particularly worried that we do have naturally occurring affordable housing in the historic district. And if they're doing a home repair and then find out that it wasn't in compliance or whatnot, I wouldn't want to do that to someone who was trying to keep their house on. And may not have thought, hey, I need to go to the town and figure out if I can replace my window that got broken or something like that. So
Yeah, that's why we thought maybe in lieu of the hire after the facts, maybe we could do, we could work with communications with Public Information Office and maybe do a mailer or something. And maybe just try and provide more information, because we have had a lot of new residents in the last few years.
those are just my thoughts. I'd like to see how the compliance goes, and what you find and do the education, before we go from 0 to, I was gonna say 0 to 60, but in this case, 0 to, 500. Really zooming down the road, but I'm particularly worried, especially when I think about a lot of the homes that have been on the historically, what I would consider like the more historically black side of the historic district. And there are certainly a lot, and they're certainly more modest as well, that 1,000 just seems a lot, is really steep for me.
I mean, I think that there absolutely has to be education. But when it's after the fact, that's the thing that bothers me, is that especially in the historic district where already they're primed to communicate. And with the Historic District Commission, I mean, there's a lot of built in. There really is no, unless someone, some weird extenuating circumstance where they are out of the picture for years. I can't come up with a viable reason why there wouldn't be communication ahead of time. And we do know of some folks that will absolutely flaunt it, and I want that to be painful for them for flaunting it. And that's the whole point, is to be in communication. If it were before the fact, that's a whole different ballgame, but this is after the fact. And we do need more communication, absolutely. So, like I said, there is a whole, I would love to find a way, somewhere. Even if it was, forgiveness of the first offense, maybe. If it was someone new. But we've got some egregious cases and it does take up a lot of staff time. So, and no, We need, we need the education, but we also need, that education goes two ways.
So you're gonna stick to 500
I do.
on zoning and 1,000 on
I
HTC.
do.
Evelyn, what are your thoughts on increasing the non-compliance?
The non-compliant one that he was talking about. I've had a rough day. I'm having trouble seeing that one. I can see this one better. Either my hearing or my vision. But you're talking about the, what now? Which one you talking about?
After the fact.
You mean for the zoning or you, so you're not discussing
Well-
I thought somebody was discussing, he was discussing first the person who was going out and checking the.
Yeah, I think first we're talking about the zoning, after the
The
fact
zoning.
zoning compliance, which is usually, I guess, maybe outside the historic district.
So it's either, it's going from, the way I'm reading it after the fact, it's either going, Kathleen suggests going from 200 to
I wanted to see 500 and 1,000.
500 rather than 1,000.
No, five, so the out of, after
I
the
don't see
fact.
1,000
Yeah,
up there.
we're confusing two things.
Okay.
Let's talk about the first one, and that's
First
the
one's fine.
zoning compliance. So last year, there was no penalty, and staff were proposing 200, and Kathleen thinks it
Okay.
should be 500. Do you agree with 200, 500, or something different?
No. I don't wanna go above 500. And did you think 500 was a little bit much?
That's really up to this board. I think that 500 may be a little surprising to people, especially going from 0 to 500. But if this board finds 500 appropriate, that's what we'll charge.
So you've got to deal with it. I mean, you have to deal with it. So, I mean, is that gonna cause a lot of argument, you think?
It'll depend on the financial means generally of the person who, and whether they knew or they didn't know. And again, there's not like a sliding scale for how willfully you did something that you maybe weren't necessarily permitted to do. We thought that $200, at least to start with, going from 0 to 200 would at least capture some of that staff time that we are spending trying to track these down and get them fixed.
Yeah, that would seem fair. With everything going up. Of course, these are new. I don't want to take up all day, but everything is going up, and that's very bothersome to me. If you think you can manage 500, I could easily go with 300 or 400, but I don't know whether it makes any difference. I guess it would to somebody's pocketbook, but I mean, and if you're telling somebody who's doing something, I guess if they don't know, 500 would be. Okay, if that's the first time thing, but it seems like it should be a little bit less. But I'm just considering everything you have to pay. It's gonna be a rough year for most people.
But what I am hearing is those of you watching at home, you have an after the fact zoning compliance permit, and you get it in before June 30th. No matter what, it's not gonna be free, starting July 1st.
So when I
Okay.
build my new house, I better get it done before.
Well, if you're in compliance, it's not an issue.
Okay, so we have several options here. We'll see if we can come to a consensus on this one, then we'll move
No, I
on.
mean, what he just said was if I wanted to let you know, you don't want to catch the zoning, if anybody catches it, nobody may pay any attention to it, I don't know.
So how many are for 200? Show of hands. 1, 2, 3. How many for 300? How many for 500? 1. Okay, so it sounds like we're going with 200.
Well, do the historic district one.
So, what Shannon and I were just talking about, thank you for, you all for outlining that. We have been discussing, as we mentioned at the last meeting, some additional incentives related to affordable housing, that included a waiver process. one of the things that we'll look into when we don't have to make it up on the fly is, can we do a waiver process for first time offenses or something like that? But we have a package of fee adjustments we're planning to bring in the fall, so we'll work on that, between now and then as well.
And, sorry, and refresh my memory, this might be for Emily, we can change fees mid fiscal year, right? Is
Correct.
tax rates that we
Yeah.
cannot,
The tax rate's the only thing we can't change.
but utility rates, can we do those mid-year as well? Okay.
But that's at the board level, right? It's just.
Okay, and so now we'll discuss the historic district, after the fact. Certificate of appropriateness. It's been 300, the recommendation of this year is continue to be 300, Kathleen is proposing 1,000. Given everything we just said, how many votes for keeping it at the current rate of $300 for the violation?
So that's one for me that I can go up a little bit, not to 1,000. But I could go to 500.
That was why I didn't raise my hand at 300 also, is I could go up a little bit since it's been the same, but not to 1,000 either.
The offer is 500, how many? It's like an auction.
I'll take an increase because again, it's after the fact. And there should be communication. And there needs, I mean, yes, there needs to be that education, but there
They
should,
actually sign something that says I acknowledge.
exactly,
That if
and
I make a change.
and I have a problem with. Nick, especially because you sign off on it. We have to sign off on so many things and we're held accountable. After the fact, oops. And it kills our staff time, I have a problem with that.
Okay, 500, how many?
I have one question for Shannon. This might sway me to 500. Or an after the fact certificate of appropriateness, if that is in any way declined or whatever the process may be, I have to lean on Maribel here a little bit because I don't know as much about the HGC. I assume that's appeal, or if it's not granted, how does that,
Appeal to Superior Court.
so staff time? I can go with 500.
Any other general questions before I poll again? Okay,
And from staff perspective, I don't think going to 500 would be out of line based on the after the facts that we see. They're usually a lot of work to resolve.
we should update the form that says that. If you have to come back for non-compliance, it's $500 per occurrence.
That would, yeah, that may
They get their
sway people versus just the highlighted approval letter. If anything changes on this project at all, please contact us.
Well, it sounds like we have consensus on 500. Am I misreading anything?
I would like one comment. I keep on thinking about the house on Bourbon where it was flipped and sold and then the new owner had to pay on this. If, when you think about the waiver processes, is to kind of come up with something in that case.
Yes, those are the other kind of things I was thinking about is you bought it and you weren't the one who did anything, but then you're out of compliance and facing a steep fine for something, or not a fine, but a fee for something you had no say in.
And now you gotta redo everything else.
Unless title insurance covers that, I'd be curious to know if that's the case. Which we
Yeah.
had several.
Theoretically, there should be some civil remedies with the realtor or the title insurance or something, but you may not be able to recoup everything.
Yeah, I mean, there may be situations where the seller or the selling agent has failed to disclose, and then there's recourse by the buyer with the seller or the selling agent. But that's different than any remedy there would be with the town. The applicant would always have the right to appeal. I mean, as Mayor Bell had indicated. But sometimes it's easier to switch than fight. There are some people, depending on what the HDC says no to. There are some applicants will say, okay, then we will correct the problem.
Okay, sandwich boards?
25.
Only once.
Just a slight comment on sandwich boards. Most of these, not all of them, but a majority of them do, are put out in the district. So in addition to this fee, keep in mind that they're also paying the staff COA fee. So that would be a total fee. I just want to make sure that we're, so that would be $25 plus whatever this fee is for a sandwich
I
board.
did not realize that.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that when we were sitting here. I was like, it's, their total fee is actually 25 plus whatever this is.
Okay.
So it's a sign permit fee and a COA. You have to actually have two.
Or you, with the staff proposed 15?
Mm-hmm, is the
Okay.
total fee.
May I ask a question, and that is the current program going smoothly, or are you running into problems where people are creating non-compliant signs or putting out signs without getting a permit? And how much staff time is being used to
Yeah.
manage that process?
So we have two problems with sandwich board signs. One is that they have to go kind of in a specific place to not disrupt being able to use the sidewalk. And, some business, people who put out signs struggle with where that location is. We've got some legal non-conforming ones that have been out for a long time that aren't tall enough or aren't made necessarily of the correct material. We probably need to do some type of amortization on that to get them all standardized. But more often than not, people do, I think, look around and see that like everybody has one and call and do I need a permit? So we don't have a ton of problems with that. I would say the biggest problem with sandwich boards is getting them in the right location consistently because they move. So you can just pick them up. Even people walking, if they don't like where they're at, pick them up and move them over, so.
How about that? I find that a lot of organizations downtown, they are staffed by volunteers,
Yes,
and every volunteer has a different idea of where that
where
sign
that
should go.
goes, yep.
Yeah, I think, I noticed this morning that there are more of those signs out now than there were. So somebody says, well, they have one, I should have one. I don't have one. But some transfer truck, some big truck knocked the knob off my sign, so. So I don't know what I'm gonna do. But I don't particularly want one. I would like to have one, but I think. And then people are riding, this is beside the point, but people are riding bicycles again and using skateboards too, and that is gonna cause problems if they'll be hitting the signs next, so. I think you should charge something. They're supposed to take them in at night, aren't they?
They are, yes.
And they
Not
are.
everybody does that.
So if they don't take them in, I would give somebody else the job to go around, just like giving tickets for cars, to be somebody giving a ticket to take the sign in, so I don't know if it's worth it, or whether, if you could make them when they first put, but then you got so many signs out already.
Yeah, there's definitely the struggle of making sure our businesses get enough exposure and have enough signage, but doesn't start to create clutter.
Well, it used to be, I had a sign when I first moved above the store and I was made to take it down. And it was stuck onto the wood. And that was 30-something years ago. But I thought was pretty bad. Cause the sign cost and thought I had permission. I think you should charge something for them, but that's. Because it's very, I think it takes away with the people eating out front and everything else. I'm sorry to take up time, but I say so little. I think it should be, something should be charged to have them, but then you got those who already have them, so what you gonna do? You're gonna. How do you, that's more trouble to go back and collect than it is to leave it.
So to summarize, last year it was $10, staff are proposing 15, Kathleen is offering 50.
Which I would track because I didn't realize I had the other, I still think 15 is probably a little low, but it's not a hill I would die for.
Okay. Consensus to keep it at, or to go from 10 to 15 at per recommendation?
How about that?
Okay.
All right, just hit these so you can see the two together. Unhide those. Okay, the next highlighted one, fees were future land use plan or comp sustainability plan amendment, and master plan or PD amendment.
These were fine with me, these take a lot of time.
That was gonna be my question, is it really, you know, show what you have to put into it, so if the ones, the numbers that Kathleen suggested for those two really do reflect what you spend and your team spends, then. I think
Yeah.
you have to Bend to Kathleen's suggestion.
Yeah, so I would say with the future land use plan, especially that's a time that it takes to remap and to also put together staff reports and talk about the implications, which there could be many. We don't get a ton of these, that aren't done concurrently with rezonings. And then the master plan or the PD amendments, those I think those just take a lot of time to review. And again, we don't have a major or a minor on this one. So it may be as simple as, okay, well, we want to shift the unit counts over here and we want to shift the unit counts over there. And that's fairly easy, but we still have to go through the trouble of doing the public hearing to do that. There's at least a planning board meeting, joint public hearing, and then a town board meeting that staff has to attend. So that's at least 3 meetings. But it also could be a much more complicated master plan where they decide, okay, well, we said we wanted townhomes here and over here, but we've changed our mind and we want to do apartments now, or we want to do commercial. I mean, they could potentially rework the entire master plan. So I think either of these is probably appropriate. I mean, it's not a huge jump. And we were already proposing to do kind of a small jump, but if you all are more comfortable with a bigger jump, especially because we just, I think that CSA is supposed to be CSP, we just did that comprehensive sustainability plan. So it's not like it's outdated and should require a whole lot of changes.
I think the only other comment I'd make is something about what Rob was mentioning about doubling. So the first one would be 150 over double. So I'm sure maybe 600 then instead for that one. That's something you think about.
Yeah, I'm back on that. I mean,
Yeah.
Matt?
I was going to say, I think I would be fine with, them going up. I'd like to see them the same amount. I don't know if it takes the same amount of time, but, you know, and what y'all proposed is only $100 difference. What Commissioner Ferguson has proposed, there's only a $50 difference. I'd rather just see them be the same amount. They seem to maybe use similar amounts of time somewhat. They seem fairly involved, no matter what. Just consistently. I think we can agree on a number that they do the same amount, whatever that is, whether that's both of them are 750, both of them are 800, both of them are 600, something where they're in line with one another.
Thank you, Matt. Kathleen?
I mean, I don't care whether it's double or not. If it's using a lot of staff time, it's using a lot of staff time. And it just means to me, we were under covering. I want to see it covered. So I want to keep it and plus we're losing more and more of what we can charge the developers. They are going tax-free for 2 years. And we're restricted and I mean, granted, it's teensy in the big scheme of things. But, staff time. So I wanna keep it up there, whether it's 750, 800. I'm not gonna quibble over $50, but I think our staff time is valuable and I wanna see it covered and, you know, on the amendments, you know, when we approve the plans, we approve what we want to see and we're happy with, and the amendments, I want them to think very carefully. When they start going through the process. I don't want them to go willy-nilly. Not that they do, because it is costly for them, but I'd like to see that our staff time, our time's valuable too, and I don't like seeing our time short-shifted.
Evelyn?
I'll go with Kathleen.
Okay. So I think I hear two opinions for maybe doubling it from 300 to 600, two for 750. Matt? Remind me what your opinion is?
I'm fine with going up. I hear what Commissioner Ferguson is saying. I could either live with both those amendments being 600 or 750. That doesn't help.
It's appreciated. Okay. Okay, maybe answer the question first. Matt has a suggestion of making those two categories the same fee. How does everybody feel about that? Good enough? You like it? Okay.
What,
Hey, Rob.
Shannon, what do you feel about that?
The master plan take more time.
Just fine.
Master plan, like meeting with people regarding, so one for the master plan, you have the higher rate. It was
I
500.
I usually amending a master plan or a PD development because of their size would take more time, but not in every instance. And so that's where this gets tough because again, you'll have some that are pretty straightforward and easy, like changing unit counts. But then if a master plan or a PD zoning district comes in and they start wanting to shift around all kinds of different stuff, then it'll take more time. But at any rate, at a minimum, like I said, we're gonna have planning board, joint public hearing, town board, we're gonna have to advertise in the paper. We went up fairly nominally, but I think Commissioner Ferguson's suggestions are appropriate as well.
And for the future land use plan, I assume y'all also have to register that with folks beyond Hillsborough.
Yeah, we have to run those changes by the county because of the joint land use plan that we have and the joint planning agreement. But the CSP amendments that's kind of our own plan.
And when we make those changes, amendments, do y'all make those with software in-house or do you send them to a vendor to do?
We currently need a GIS technician eventually. So shout out for a GIS position in the future. But currently we use a third party, so they have to make those mapping updates.
And then you
So
go
that
back,
costs.
and then you have to review them.
Mhm. And there's some back and forth there as well.
I think it makes sense for that to be higher than. And maybe in line with the masters,
Which one are you talking about, Mark, Matt?
the future land use plan.
So I'm okay with 750 for both of those, hearing the staff feedback and time it takes. As Commissioner Ferguson mentioned, but we need to be charging what's more in line with kind of what our staff costs are instead of below that. So I'm okay with 750.
Well, I was just gonna kind of insert a parenthetical, I suppose, is my observation is that while we are not a for-profit organization, we're not allowed to make money on our fees. We don't come near covering the cost of review, even with these proposed increases. You're still losing money. So the law says that you're allowed to cover your administrative costs with the fees you charge. I'm sure that we don't. I think most municipalities don't. But you don't have to lose as much. Is my perspective.
Well, I presume that, for example, the UDO text amendment, that's not just staff review, but.
Right.
Your time.
Yeah.
And you don't think about necessarily the software and the third-party vendors and the cost of mailing notice to everybody and posting signs, and it's the hours, man hours or the person hours spent, as well as the additional out-of-pocket expense.
That's why I asked about software.
So there's a new proposal for 750 for both?
I'm fine with that, just bump it up. I think we've been cheap.
And Shannon, I'm curious, have we ever tracked actual time spent on these various things? I'm guessing not. That's a
We-
really labor intensive.
Yeah, we have
activity.
started to try and do a better job of that, just because if you look at the fee schedules for our counterparts, say Durham, Chapel Hill, Carrboro, Pittsboro, they charge considerably higher fees than we do. I think that in an effort to spur economic development and get the kind of development projects we want, we have tried to do lower fees. But in some instances, I think that developers see that as an opportunity to waste time with us sometimes. So I think it's time for us to kind of incrementally start going up on those fees. And I think it's a safe time to be able to do that. We haven't raised these fees in a while. And like I said, if you want to pull up other people's fee schedules, you may be pretty surprised at how affordable ours are.
Thank you. Moving on to variance fee. Was 300, proposal is 400, Kathleen is suggesting 600.
This is another one where staff is fine with 600. You know, we don't want to make those jumps, but if you all are comfortable with that, we're comfortable with that. The fee on the variance, we needed to go up just for the cost of notification. So, you know, again, the signs and having to do mailing paper notices. And then also just the cost of those public notices in the paper has gone up. So at $300, we might be losing money.
I said again, for me, it's just, for staff time is valuable. I've looked at other people's fees and I know we're really low and I just think that we need to. I'm not comfortable going as high, going from where we are to as high as some of those, but. I think we need, there's such a thing as value, not, not to make a profit, but. Our test staff time is valuable and I don't want to put our staff in a position where. I don't know where that sweet spot is to be accessible, but not having their time wasted, but I feel we're not capturing our staff time properly, and so.
Good. Everybody else agree, have a different opinion?
I'm
300
good.
to 600?
I like 5, but I can get behind 6 if that's.
Same, I can support 6.
Sorry, Matt.
I can support 6.
6.
Sounds like there's consensus for more or less for 6. And
And for the sidewalk in lieu, I wanted that 150.
yeah, did we didn't make a decision on the historic district commission? You'd asked, but I don't think we got to.
I thought we said 500.
You
Yes, yeah,
did, you
we
went
did.
around.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, Kathleen, go ahead.
I said I wanted 150. 150% instead of 125. Just because of
You have an
cost.
opinion?
Yeah.
I like to hear.
Yeah.
You're like jumping up.
I like
Yeah.
to hear
Yeah,
legal concerns.
there are a couple things. One is, with, in lieu and if you wanted to build a sidewalk or charge the cost of the sidewalk. The court's gonna look at whether there's a rational nexus between what you're charging for and the land use objective purpose that you're trying to fill. Then you have to look at proportionality, are you exacting from the developer an amount that is roughly proportional to what it would, cost them to build what you're asking them to build. Most of the statutes that I look at, that talk about performance bonds and the like, in the legislature, 125 is pretty much as far as they go, 125%.
Even with the costs that have been escalating.
Well, if you look at what the legislator's doing now, they're even eliminating that 125% bond.
Oh, good God.
So, I mean, it's just, I think the courts and the legislature are pretty active about this and
Okay.
are less tolerant of higher fees, largely because there's a good home builders construction lobby out there. And so I'm not comfortable with 150%. You could try it.
Well, I mean, I don't want to bring down the RAF, but I mentioned that because I'm conscious of just the escalation of costs. And,
But if you have a percentage, the escalation of cost, you're still getting more money
okay,
or more security. Because if you, 125% of 1,000 is
Sure.
whatever, and then, but 125% of 1,500 is more.
right, yeah. No, I'll let that go. What I don't wanna do is incur the wrath needlessly. I'd rather, if I'm gonna incur the wrath, it's gonna be for a good reason.
Yeah, and I actually looked at this issue this afternoon because I've seen it was one of the items on the agenda, so.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I remember when we made, I don't know if it was a UDO amendment, and we got into this discussion about well, it said relational nexus. Yeah, the rational nexus.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's not like we could collect this fee in West Hillsborough and conceivably go use it for Ridgewalk, that it needed to be
Geographically.
somewhere
Proximate.
close by, and that one of the examples of when we did that amendment that I thought of, and I still think it's part of my language dumb, that there's a disconnected sidewalk in Bellevue that goes nowhere, but because it was in our UDO, they had to construct it, and it's not really amenable to building a sidewalk, and that's kind of where I think we have where we got the UDO text amendment is to alleviate that. We did talk about 125% was probably the upper estimate of what we could do. And I think staff originally may have those less than 125.
Yeah, I think we initially just said 100, I mean, just 100%.
Right.
Whatever the
Commissioner
engineer's estimate is.
Echoed that concern about escalated costs and whatnot, so I think 100.
Yeah, the legislature is even talking about reducing or in some cases eliminating your authority to require sidewalks, some kinds of.
Yeah, I know they're talking-
Required on both sides of the street or they're.
Yeah, they're talking about that so that the haves get to have a sidewalk and the have-nots, you just get run over.
We're ready to move on to the next?
So that is the last highlighted example. Are there any of these other fees that the board wishes to discuss further?
Yeah, I just have one from Shannon with the annexation and how that's 0 and being proposed to go to 75. I assume the Waterstone South is like an extreme example of how involved an annexation can be. Is 75 good, with the exception of that one outlier?
Now, where are you?
It's right,
It's
right below the
other
historic,
requests and fees.
it's right below the historic district after the fact COA.
So we get very few annexations that don't come with rezoning, and that kind of goes back to the fees start to stack. And so I kind of had a conversation with Matt and Engineering Services about that too, is we've got to be mindful not just of the fees that planning is charging, but of other divisions and departments, because if you don't kind of watch everybody, they will start to stack and add up to be quite pretty significant. For annexation, there's not a whole lot that planning has to do other than review it, make sure that it's either contiguous or non-contiguous, put together the staff report. Look, I'm gonna say there's not a lot for us to do, and then I'm gonna list 10 things, but it's really not hard or time intensive, and
Small constraints.
yeah, and it's again, it comes usually with a rezoning or a land use plan amendment or both, so that fee ends up being pretty significant. And we have also historically not charged for annexation because we wanted to encourage it to grow our corporate limits and grow our tax base. So if you all are comfortable going a little bit higher, we certainly probably spend some amount of staff time on annexation, but just keeping in mind that other departments may be charging to review annexations, particularly water and sewer, and trying to figure out the availability of water and sewer to those is a little bit more challenging than with planning and us being like, is it contiguous or not? What makes sense zoning wise there?
I'm good with it. where it is. I was just kind of curious if that was just a very interesting example where I think we knew more about the annexation. There were questions about it. There was the county involved.
Yeah,
$75 wouldn't cover that.
challenge, yeah.
But I assume they're usually pretty easy.
They're usually easier, and we're dipping our toes into putting a fee in for this. It may be that, you know, after 2 years from now, nobody really says anything and we can track, okay, well, beginning to end, we did these annexations, this is how much staff hours there is. And we need to, we know we need to charge a bigger fee, and you all thus far have seemed supportive of going up on these fees a little bit, so. We'll track things a little bit better and bring back some data and see if we need to adjust things for next fiscal year.
Great, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Oh, we've got Shannon here. So thank you all for your time on that. I know that's a little bit of a slog, but I mean, I appreciate, you know, getting to learn some more about some of those fees and have a back and forth discussion. We do have another set of fees, and I'm trying to figure out where I can get to.
Third slide,
Third.
chat.
Yes.
I'm looking for you all can refer to in your package, the engineering services. So, first, a clarification, just because this came up earlier today among staff. These are not duplication of fees that currently exist in water and sewer. These are things that were moved from water and sewer charges to, general fund, fees and charges with the creation of the engineering services division. And so that's why you see a move. We're not stacking those on top of fees that are charged for similar services for utilities. Most of the clarifications are to alleviate situations that we are dealing with pretty consistently, where you get to the end of a review process and you have to go back and see, okay, last year, how many times did I touch this thing? And then you have to collect a fee from somebody who is either already building their project or has decided not to build their project and has no interest in paying you any money, and it's eating up a ton of time. And so the primary movement is to have these fees charged before the fact for the engineering reviews. So I just wanted to cover those two things, before the fact and not duplication. These are fees that were previously part of water and sewer. So I'll answer any questions you all have about the specific fees.
No, that makes sense. I'm glad to see that it's up front so that y'all are not spending all that time chasing, because I know that there was time that was spent chasing, and sometimes a lot of it.
I do have one question, which is, there's a line in the footnote, second from the bottom. It's part of the sentence that begins construction drawings, but in the line second from bottom, it says, unless a public street subdivision of the lot or permitted water sewer extension is proposed. That reads to me like everyone's eventually, inevitably is going to pay, the fee, and I believe that's on the multifamily construction drawing review fee, the water and sewer and stormwater construction drawing review fee, and the water, sewer and stormwater construction. Well, they're all, it's just whether it's multifamily or then less than 20 lots and more than 20 lots. But the way that reads, it sounds like, especially if we're saying, well, we don't want private roads,
Well, yeah,
then they have to be private, then we prefer public streets, that inevitably everyone would pay for it or pay that fee.
Because you're not gonna have a public street. There's
a
an
private street.
ADU, doesn't mean you're gonna be putting in a
We
street.
don't want private streets.
So what the distinction here is we don't currently, and we're not proposing to charge if you have basically a single site review for single family duplex, triplex, or ADU. Where the construction drawing review charge is proposed to happen is if you have basically, you're taking one lot and dividing into two. Well, that's a different level of complexity in the site review, or if you're adding a road, or if there's a water and sewer extension. So this is to take out like, either you've got an existing home that's in disrepair, you're taking it down and you're replacing it with light. You're not having to upsize the utilities, you're not adding a street, you're not, or you're adding an ADU. Those wouldn't pay the construction drawing review fee. It's the more complex cases that would.
That answers my question. Thank you. That's why I asked. It does bother me to some extent that, single family homes have no review fee. For me, I believe that a lot of local rules, regulations, fees are preferential towards single family homes, and I would like to see a fee for a single family home if staff believe it to be, something that we can do, that there's a justified cost associated with it. But I do think that when we talk about things like affordable housing and other things, what a lot of people talk about is how, the default often is single family in terms of preference, and therefore they don't go through as much review, they don't go through, a lot of the hurdles that multifamily does. So.
Thank you, Matt. Do you think staff could come back with thoughts on that? And if there needs
Yeah,
to
I
be
just
a
want
fee for
to
that?
clarify, like, these are specific to engineering services review of infrastructure. I think one of the distinctions, so there are zoning related fees for, single family homes. And there are all the building permit fees that Orange County charges. The reason there's not an engineering service fee is there's generally not a lot of infrastructure, associated with it. If there's a new sewer tap, those fees are covered under utilities. Engineering service fees are really applying where you've got a road or you've got a water and sewer extension of the system and things like that. And so for this fee schedule, that's why they're not specifically called out, but we can take a look and bring that back with the fall package.
I would like that, just so that we can be sure of that. Because I do think of, some single family things that have come to us where utilities have weighed in, presumably maybe free of charge. And I would just like us to review and make sure it's appropriate.
Happy to do that. Anything else on the engineering fees? Okay, thank you all.
Thank you, Matt. Jim?
Next up is community reinvestment. We started discussions last week about the various agencies that had applied for funding, and just as a FYI, we do have a representative from Exchange Club Park here in the audience tonight, if there's any questions specifically related to their request. Last week's meeting, there were a couple of proposals that were made. We've captured that hopefully in the packet that was sent out with funding option 1 and 2. So Mayor Bell, I don't know if I'll turn it over to you to gauge interest in either option or alternative plans.
Thank you, Emily. So as a reminder, I think we had consensus on funding requests and allocations for Fairview Community Watch, Hillsborough Arts Council, and OCIM. And there was a desire to fund Exchange Club Park, but questioned some of the fees and the overall increase. And then there was very little support for, varying support, but not overwhelming support for Disability Awareness Council in the table. So I think you have a list of questions that we're going to. That's for the next option. So top of page 70, there is kind of funding option scenario number 1. And then below that is funding option number 2 from staff based on our conversation, an hour-long conversation about all the various facets of these things. So I think I will kind of go around the table, Megan, starting with you, and to ask if you have any clarifying questions for staff on any of these items, and if you have, what are your feelings about funding option number 1, number 2, and if there's, if you want to create a custom option.
No custom options tonight. At least for this one. I have no questions for staff, and thank you for coming this evening. We have questions for you, Exchange Club. I'm more partial to option 1, just reducing the liability insurance.
Rob.
Um. So I just didn't feel that Disability Awareness Council, and that I got enough information from the Disability Awareness Council on table. From a new person that we haven't funded, a new group that we haven't funded, recently or ever. And so I just don't feel like I have enough information to be able to honor their request for funding this year. So I'm good with either option. If we choose to go with option one, I would just say that, we make the exchange club part an even 10,000, so it's me, it's just to me, it's in line with the CIM and fair do. But you know, do so. Okay.
Thank you, Rob. See, I did down some comments. Yeah, I guess my first comment was I want to thank everybody for the spirited and lengthy conversation we had at the last meeting about this. It's a very small amount of money, and we spent a lot of time talking about that. That's a reflection of that we care about how money is spent and all the various good options that are available to us. And also, given the fact that we want to recognize that from a financial perspective, we're projecting very flat revenues, we're deficit spending, and we had at least one organization decrease their annual amount, not increase. So I think we'll probably see more of that as the funding years 27, 28 come, our deficit grows and grows and grows. So we're going to continue to be very budget conscious about how much money we have to spend. So I would be okay with either one or two. I think I have a preference for two, but then also to keep it simple, as Rob says, for an even amount. So I'm open to that as well.
All right. I too favor option two. I believe the Disabilities Awareness Council is worthy. I think they need a stronger application of how they plan to operate in Hillsborough and within the corporate limits specifically. I think that greater amount of detail would be needed to make it easier to consider. I do think that one of the things is, of course, it's chicken or the egg. We want to see them do more and demonstrate that to come and ask us for funds. And so that makes me a little uneasy. I do think option two is the better one of the two options. There's 5,200 left over after that, which isn't a lot of money. I would like to see what the council would do with the 5,200. But otherwise, bank it, make the exchange club, a nice even number. And then I do have a request, maybe from staff, or maybe Jen, you can jog my memory, but as part of the application, under financial information, folks just put in their budget number for what they have.
Yes.
And so one thing I think would be helpful next year would be to actually ask them for their budget for the year. That way we have the context of their organizational budget, so that we have the context of, what their activities are, and that sort of thing. So I think that does help make, evaluation easier. And I know the tourism board asks for the organizational budget in addition to how they plan to use, grants. Or when it's a contracted partner, the funds from the contract, and so, I just throw that out there, that it would be good to have some context of how much within their current fiscal year budget, because they're not gonna go up generally, that much for a nonprofit. If anything, they might go down, year to year rather than up. Especially in tight times, so it would be interesting to see, just to see really like how much would this be effective or helpful towards the organization. OCIM, I understand, we're doing that for, folks who are struggling with their bills and whatnot. We know that will be exhausted no matter how big OCIM's budget would be, but I think for the others, it'd be good to have some context. And to see the diversity of funding sources that Commissioner Ferguson was concerned about originally, about leveraging dollars. It would be good to know, how much is local government, how much is in-kind donations of whatnot, of services, or, any number of things, so.
Thank you, Matt. And let me just bring up in a similar kind of line of thinking that when I look at 501c3s, I always look at their 990s to see kind of, are they in good standing and budgets. You get some of that information, qualitative information from a 990. And so I would like for us to add asking for the most current 990, because it gives us also insight into, general maybe health or solvency of an organization. So I think that could be helpful. And everybody should have a fairly current 990. And if they don't have a current 990, that's still good, red flag.
Yeah, and then. If we ask for that 990, we don't have to ask the question of, have you been audited recently? Because that is a question on the 990, so. Under penalty of perjury, so I've signed many 990s under penalty of perjury, so. But I think that would be helpful, as well as just to ask for the 990. Thank you.
Definitely.
I favor option one. I am fine with the even amount of 10,000 for Exchange Club. I like having a remainder because we will be asked for something in some odd, and even though it's only gonna end up being with the odd bit being, roughly 2,800, that's still 2,800. So, yeah, I would have liked to have seen Disabilities Awareness Council be more prepared for Hillsborough. As Commissioner Hughes is, more about what was planned for Hillsborough proper. I didn't feel they were prepared. If you're gonna ask us money, I want to feel like you're coming to us prepared. I have no doubt that they do a lot of good. And it's certainly, this is way back when my first job in insurance, and the stats still hold true. It's pretty much 5 out of 6 people in their lifetime will have experiences of disability. It's our bodies will. We either through birth, accident, illness, some stuff, a lot of us, stuff happens and they do good service. At the same time, because we do have to make some very hard choices, the most prepared, it helps us. When I don't want to make a decision on just pure guesswork and hope, wing, and a prayer. So I hope in the future that it's more just better preparation. But yeah, option one, and I'm fine with the even 10,000.
Thank you. Evelyn, do you have a preference for option one or option two, or would you like to propose something else?
I think option one, I can remember, and I'll add this, several years ago when they were coming before us, there was a man that didn't agree that he didn't have hands and he used his feet.
No, I wasn't here for that.
He used his feet
There's a
the
landscape.
barn, and he represented the disability. I think he died not that long ago, but he was from Chapel Hill. But he could do everything he could do, he had to do with his feet. I mean, he had no arms. And that was the one that I can remember the most. That was a true disability, and he got around with it, and he was able to present it. So, I mean, that's somebody from Chapel Hill, but still, it goes on, it happens a lot.
Absolutely.
And Evelyn, one of the comments we've heard from most everybody else is, for the Exchange Club, would you propose going up to an even 10,000?
That's better than, yeah, I'll settle for that if everybody else is. I would like for them to get more than what's the 7,500. And that would be 2,500, that would be okay.
Okay, well, it looks like we have there's a clear preference for, option number one with an even 10,000 for the Exchange Club. And what I don't think we have clarity on is what would we do with any funds that are left over? Should they be returned to the general fund? Or should they be held in reserve for future emergency requests or carried over to the next year?
I would personally prefer either to the general fund, either general fund or held for us for future requests.
I would say return to the general fund.
General fund.
General.
Evelyn?
What did she say?
General fund.
General fund.
Okay, well, it sounds like there's consensus then. to
Which is
return.
where a request would come from.
Exactly.
Right, that's
Yeah.
right.
Exactly.
It makes sense. Okay, does that cover everything? Do we answer
I think
all
so.
the questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then next up, we'll have affordable housing.
Thank you. Back for round two of fun with spreadsheets. So, in preparation for this, we sent you all a staff memo that outlined, the base option plus a couple of modifications that were proposed during the last, board meeting. And then we have a live edit version here. If there's something the board wants to see differently, this will allow you to see real-time impacts to any changes you might propose. I did want to add, in all of the scenarios, we have included a reservation of funding for affordable housing strategy. Central Pines Regional Council has provided a scope of work that would include a needs analysis, Hillsborough specific strategies and investment priorities, stakeholder and resident engagement, and staff and board interviews and consensus building. And so that's what would be covered under that budget, and timeframe would be delivery within next fiscal year if that's something the board chooses to fund. Do you all have any questions about the various proposals? Do you want to see a different version? Or there are a number of questions in the agenda item that we can walk through.
I have a kind of a general question, and this is for Kathleen. For the partnership did let's scroll to what it's called. They did a gap analysis back in 2021.
They did
Is there
that.
any talk of updating?
It's updated ongoingly, so when we do the extended budget and expansion budget, it's based on the updated gap analysis. So, in terms of give me a moment, I can pull up, but in terms of what is still needed, it hasn't changed much. For us, the 24-hour bathrooms, we don't fund, but that's still on there. Permanent supportive housing is still there. Rental assistance is still there. Housing units are still there. The street outreach still there. burial insurance, and not burial insurance, but burial, and care of those homeless who die is still there. Dealing with the pets, I mean, the needs are still.
Okay, thank you. Well, I just want to say.
I don't know if I'm answering your question.
You are, yeah, that's helpful to know, because it's, Matt, as I was thinking about. Setting aside money, taking money from the affordable housing allocation to. Hire a consultant or to help come up with the data. I was wondering if that gap analysis would request our funding. Down the road to update that to. Yeah, if it was going to be requested, it sounds like it's just an ongoing.
It's just it's an
Okay.
ongoing thing. I would not anticipate that.
And is there, I mean, that gap analysis is broad and there's a lot of emphasis on emergency and homelessness.
Right.
Funding and which is part of what we're, it's in our scope of affordable housing, but our scope. Is focused on other things as well that maybe are not part of that matrix.
Right,
So-
because the partnership down to homelessness, their remit is prevention and services.
Right.
And it's, and they have to deal with the HUD definition of point in time, count, not the McKinney version, which is the schools. So the McKinney definition is probably closer to being accurate.
Thank you. I just want to make sure before we have the discussion about committing funding for that analysis, that there wasn't duplicative of what the partnership was to, or that the partnership would come back and ask us for money to service to fund it, so. Okay, so Matt, how would you prefer? Would you like to go through the options that were laid out? Do you want to go through the questions to help us answer those needs, or?
Sure, so I'll very briefly go through the options. So option one, proposal A. This was the modified version that was discussed at the workshop. This is basically the staff's recommended budget with a little clarification. The things that were added are highlighted in red. There was some discussion among the board about not sort of abandoning the pilot program, so providing continuation funding. So this shows what that impact would be. Almond Village, we have at a total of 300,000 of investment during the budget window, a total of 400,000 commitment through FY 29, and then 50,000 for the affordable housing strategy. This, sorry, go ahead, sir.
I was just gonna say, we're on page 73 of the packet, if anybody's following from.
So this scenario depletes a lot of the cumulative housing fund. So the total available through FY 29 is roughly $60,000. And for each of the scenarios, we have also added a tax rate equivalent. So if the annual affordable housing funding, the name we're using instead of the 2-cent commitment to avoid confusion, if that number is set at what's in here in the yellow, this is the equivalent on the post revaluation tax rate. So for FY 26, if it was funded at $250,000, that's the equivalent of 1.12 cents on the current tax rate. Yes, sir.
On top of the 5.7, that is.
No, this is, so the 250 is included in the budget. There was just a question in the earlier evaluation of how much of our total budget is going towards this and what is that expressed in a tax rate. So then the second proposal was the one that Commissioner Hughes sent during the meeting. The differences there were no funding for the pilot programs, a reduced funded partnership expansion, support for funding 300,000 of the $400,000 for Almond Village, and funding for the affordable housing strategy. This scenario leaves just over $100,000 in the 3-year window for other housing activities. And you can see it decreases the draw on the tax rate by anywhere from 1/3 to 2/3 of a cent. And that's that flat funding of 175 through the budget window. And then the third proposal was to reduce the annual funding to 175, either consistent through the window or ramped up after the completion of the affordable housing strategy. But then in the meantime, taking the difference between this number and what was proposed and redirecting it towards one of the ramp ups that was discontinued to try to balance the budget. And so the specific suggestion was for the fire department. Staff would recommend, if that's an option the board wants to consider, that it be pegged towards the construction of the fire station. That will occur before the need for the fire trucks. And that ramp up was also discontinued in the proposed budget. In addition to that, there was some funding left for the pilot programs, and this is essentially just, what was remaining in the capacity. It was about $90,000 over the 3 years. And then you can see everything else consistent. This, more or less taps out the ability to do anything else in the housing fund, and continues the tax rate equivalent at the same as the proposed budget. Commissioner Darrow, do you have anything to add? This was your suggestion.
Yeah, it just that I was thinking that it would be ramped up after the first 175, so then we'd go to the 250 and 320, is it? Yeah, 320.
So, okay.
And so if you do that, you add 250 to 320, that increases the amount eligible for the housing fund up to around $220,000 by the end of the period. It also gives you additional flexibility on funding the pilot program.
And that
So
was-
you could
yeah.
offer these numbers as well.
I think when I talked to you, it was like whatever was left over, kind of keeping a balance in the fund to put into that line item.
So you could do something that looks like that, 200 and 100, and that would, leave you just a little bit left. And then, or you could change those however you want.
Yeah, I figured that would be the one that would change depending on what we want to keep in the housing fund.
So then you could do something like that.
It's on the third option. No, Benny, right there.
So
I was in a different color.
the only change I need to make then would be to delete that. And you would have something left here. What would you have? Yeah, 70,000. So that would give you a total of 145,000 over 2 years that could be reallocated to one of the other ramp ups, or reduced and returned to the general fund.
Can you move back up? I'm sorry with the changes. Okay, I'm sorry. All right, now I can go down. Now you can go down.
This mouse is very
Since
sensitive.
we've collapsed this menus, we can see more of the spreadsheet.
Collapse this.
Yeah,
The top.
I don't know what I'm talking about the top quarter of the
Gotcha.
screen is just menu options of file, home, insert, share.
I like this, what I'm seeing right there.
We just have to fine tune the pilot programs, right? Because we're doing negative or something.
Well, so these are money that you're basically drawing from reserve savings. So money that's been set aside.
Okay, I
So
think
it's
your old
okay.
one had
Yeah.
the fund, the actual fund in it.
Yeah.
It's okay if these numbers go a little negative. But you could, so if we zero those out and see.
So just to be clear, Megan, your proposal is to take some of the affordable housing money and put it towards the fire station.
Yes.
And that is. Can you explain your thinking about
Wait,
why
this is
we should,
different?
why we should move it from affordable housing? to
Oh,
fire
wait.
station?
Well, I was taking into account what Matt had sent out about not having a plan and keeping the ramp up steady. And having $75,000 left over in that. I wasn't quite sure about putting that back in the general fund to reduce the tax rate. Instead, let's try to fund something that we took off the list is pretty much what I was thinking.
And Matt, for everyone's edification, so we have decided to, in this budget proposal, to not pre-fund the fire station as one of the cost-cutting measures for the general fund of this year.
Yes, so the,
This project, this Megan's proposal would add just a little bit back into it.
yes, if that's the board, if that's what the board would like to reallocate those to, it would go back towards a portion of the paused ramp up. And Emily, can you clarify, do we keep the ramp up at the current level and just freeze increases?
Yes.
While we're talking about Megan's proposal, other questions about the general strategy to decrease affordable housing to fund the future fire station?
I don't like this. I liked what I saw before. I don't like this.
So the only change I made is I had to move some of these numbers. I misspoke. This number does need to stay positive down here.
Yeah, one of the things that I mean. I'm still going back to. Is option A is any reduction would be. On the pilot, the first year being 100,000, keeping the rest. But the rest of option A and then that extra. Just holding off. For accumulation.
So you're saying,
I still like going back to option A where it says 200,000 for the pilot. 100,000 across the board. That's what I would like to see.
so that keeps the ramp up at the proposed budget levels
Yes,
of 250 and 320.
yes,
And then consistent with the Almond Village and affordable housing.
Yep.
And this fully funds the partnership.
and actually do the 100, 100, 100. So instead of 70 and 130, 100, 100. Yes, sir.
And so Matt, in that, in the original one, where it's 70,000 for Almond Village, was that to keep the cumulative housing funds
Yes.
positive?
Yeah, so we,
So I
yeah,
assume that.
just pushed some of it out to FY 27 to keep the total at 300 over 3 years. But deal with the cash flow in FY 26. But if you do this, if you reduce the pilot programs, you don't have to do that. Wrong.
And Matt, can you please remind us about the pilot programs, the 2 pilot programs? Is this just a guesstimate that they would continue at that proposed level of 100,000 in years 2 and 3, or maybe into the future, or?
So the original staff proposal was 1 year funding only at 200,000, and then a chance to evaluate for next budget cycle. 1, how successful were the pilots, and then 2, what's the continued need? With the EHA, that is a bottomless well. You could put money in there every year and there will always be a need for it. With the repair, there's a more finite need. And so you may be able to fund that at a higher level than this for a year or 2 and catch up with some of the backlog. But we won't really have that information until we provide funding, we figure out which homes we can take off the list.
Yeah, my rationale for doing this because the backlog is humongous. It is absolutely humongous. It would take us, well, even with aging houses, we would still never really catch up. It's helping. But I don't see us catching up.
I would prefer to see this as 2 lines instead of 1 line for both
Went for
pilot
repair.
programs. That's just the way my brain works. That way we can tweak the 2 if we wanted to do that. We can see what that change would look like. I think that's one of the
Questions we have to answer tonight, which is how do we want to split the pilot program? So I think it would be good to see it because we'll have to talk about it eventually anyway.
And are you suggesting 50-50?
Yeah.
Is there, I'm sorry, thank you.
Yeah, the only hang up I have with the pilots is really straightforward, which is the fact that they're pilots, so projecting out, even if it is a bottomless well, especially with the EHA pilot. That by putting it in our budgets for 27, 28, if we decide based on a plan from staff, based on our own discussions, to change course on that, and we decide to give less, that we want to do something different. We as a board look miserly doing so. And I would rather keep those lines open for 27, 28. So we can get what y'all are gonna bring to us, we can look at it as an all of the above kind of strategy and some other things, rather than putting in the placeholder numbers. Because with the word pilot and going ahead and committing at least two, we're saying we want to commit at least 2 more years, 2 more fiscal years to that. We're kind of boxing ourselves in to do so. Not that it's not worthy, not that it's not helpful. But I think that putting future years in it basically isn't going to be a pilot at that point.
Yes, sir, and I'll add that was one of the other reasons why we proposed a single year of funding is, we advanced this as an option to the board without benefit of having your conversation, and so we were clear in our discussions with the potential partners, this would be one-time money. And so because we didn't want to create this expectation of annual recurring funding without having this conversation. And so,
Why are we calling it a pilot though? Because in years, we have been providing rental assistance for years. It's been smaller, but we've been doing it for years, pre-COVID. And it was much, much smaller. Repairs, we weren't able to, but certainly the need was there, but I don't understand why we call it a pilot. We've got track records with the county, we've got track records with the nonprofits. It's not even a pilot for us.
it was really to denote a trial for staff purposes.
I'm thrilled that we're actually, because we have done rental assistant for years, and including pre-COVID. And it was, there were some years it was 70, if memory serves, it was 72 or 7,900 is what comes to play. So, having 50,000 is like huge for us. Setting aside the monster grant that Margaret worked out with Carborough. But I know that it was a pittance compared to the need then, and it's just grown. And like I said, on the repair side, it's just huge. So, I'm okay. As I think that, what we need to look at is, how it's being used, what's it being used for, what is the average dollar amount, what are the types of repairs, that kind of stuff I would love to know, because in years past, it ended up, we had to be careful because, and it had to do with some of the code thing, and I have memories of different things that they did, they had to go to code, and that would definitely increase the costs. And so anyhow, that kind of stuff, I'd be interested, but I'm okay seeing 3 years out. Because the need's not gonna go away.
Yeah, do you mind if I kind of raise the question on that so we can kind of advance this? How many people by show of hands would like to see a 3-year projection for these 2 pilot programs, some number, or versus just putting something in for next year?
Well, I just want to be clear that we're going to fund it for 1 year. And whatever we put in there obviously is not guaranteed. I don't mind seeing it on ours, but I don't want to leave also the impression that we're definitely getting, funded at that next, whatever.
Is that everybody's?
I wanna see it
I'm
funded for a
positive,
year.
I think it would. I'm okay with that, actually.
For all three.
I'm okay with all 3 years. I think it's such an important thing. I would like to see, honestly, Matt, if you can plug in a number, 150 for the repairs. Or 100 for the repairs, 50 for the EHA. What that does to the bottom. From what I hear from the, and I hear much more from the repair side, I don't know if that's just because, I don't know, you know. I haven't heard much. Many people advocating about the emergency housing assistance. I know it's, very important. I know it's utilized. But I definitely heard more feedback from people in our community regarding the home repair side. And so I definitely want on the fair side. Yeah. I would wait a little bit. I'm fine with 200, honestly. But I would also do 125 and 75 or something like that. But I don't know, you guys know more about that.
I mean,
Also
it's,
systems, and I know that it gets used, it's
it's,
spent.
yeah. You know, and the way it's used both on landlords as well as, the owners, so it benefits.
I know it has an immediate impact,
Yeah.
but I like the long-term sustainable,
Exactly.
that you're better.
Other comments on the math as it stands? Megan's does not include moving money to the fire department,
Which is
fire
fine.
station.
I was just kind of taking some ideas of what I heard, trying to come up with some other idea too, so.
Okay, thank you.
If the board does not want to go that route with the ramp ups, that's fine.
So this proposal as it stands would leave $21,019 available.
For next year, but cumulatively over the 3 years, only about 8,000, because you're gonna draw some of this down.
Get pretty flat.
Yeah, I wonder what that does for 2029.
Are we, but I think we're at the stage where we don't want to keep accumulating money. We want to spend it for a variety of purposes in affordable housing, so.
So,
I'm not too nervous about that low number. So, but
Megan, to answer your question, 28 and 29 would look virtually
Same,
identical
yeah.
because you've sort of peaked the ramp up. The wild card is going to be what's going on in the future with the partnerships budget. Because their continuation budget has been creeping up. And so, that's a future decision point.
But I mean, I look at this, we're gonna have to tweak in whatever years anyway, but I like this blueprint as a place to go. And depending on what comes out with what Central Pines does, we may tweak, but again, knowing, we have data on what there is needs in the community. I think this is really good.
So administratively, I think what we would suggest is bring forward 1-year MOUs with the partners on the pilots. We can show the planning funds for our purposes, but having 1-year agreements, for service, and then that allows us some flexibility. If FY 27, we get the report back, we want to go a different direction, or if there's another project that pops up that the board, wants to direct that funding, we just end the MOU after 1 year.
Matt, Evelyn? What are your thoughts on the spreadsheet on the screen?
Well, I actually like, as we've made the sausage a little bit, I like the modified proposal on the screen a lot better than what was originally proposed in the budget. I think that it commits us to doing strategy, which I think has been overdue. I still have a concern about putting those numbers in the final version that comes to us in June. Just because I don't want us to accidentally box ourselves in, because even though the six of us and the staff around the tables know what our intentions are, folks are gonna pull up the budget and say, but you promise, this is a promise, and when we take a vote, we are promising that we want to do these things, and I think that town operations are one thing. That's a promise we're making to ourselves, but I think those are promises made to the community, and so I really wouldn't. I think for planning purposes, it makes sense, but I think what we officially adopt, it would be best for us to leave it out. Or, you know, whatever communication staff puts out about the budget, that it is made abundantly clear that this is for planning. We think this is the direction we might go in, but it's contingent on the strategy that we're gonna fund, and these numbers may go up, they may go down. And I think the reason I say that is we got so many emails. And I think one reason we haven't gotten the EHA as much is because there's a lot of shame in that kind of thing. I know people personally who have used the EHA who wouldn't write in and tell you that they did it. Because circumstances happen and they're not always the people you think they are.
Exactly.
So, you know. I know folks who have used EHA especially, and I just don't want someone to look and just see that it might be an expectation if our strategy ends up just being slightly different, that these numbers change. Did they go up? Great. No one's gonna nail us to a cross for them going up. They go down, they get redistributed. We call it something different. You know, I think there's some concerns there, but I like this a lot better than what was initially proposed, with the exception of the expansion request. And it's not that I don't think it's worthy or valuable. We often talk about what is our responsibility versus the county. I know the county has a lot of pressures. But in our packet, it did say that it was in part to pay for a county FTE. And that just gives me some heartburn in general. That the county is helping balance their budget with municipal tax dollars. And it's just not something I particularly like on principle, but I can live with this.
Matt, can we add something to both maybe the, our website as well as the budget document that emphasizes that we're investing in strategy, and so future fundings beyond current proposed fiscal year are subject to reevaluation of the strategic analysis?
Yes, we'll work with the budget team and communications to make sure that's communicated in the documents. When we do the revised chart, we'll have some asterisks in those FY 27-28 numbers that say, you know, pending completion of pilot programs and reevaluation.
And I am okay, actually, based on what commission, I'm okay if we did show only 1 year, knowing that we have talked about this. If it's less, because I agree, the last thing I wanna do is set.
But TBD. in those-
That exact, yeah, TBD works perfectly.
Does that work with the formula?
I think it-
I was gonna
I
add-
think
It does, words don't count for, you know.
Exactly.
Add another line for the TBD.
No.
And Matt, remind me, you got 200,000, was it? Did they come to us with that number? You pulled it out of the air, so we have no idea what.
I mean, we've given you all some context of what that might accomplish. But it really was just, I started talking with the folks that are on these programs saying, hey, if we had a chunk of money, what could we do to try to get some of this out in the community? And that was just a round number.
I know, I love hearing that, because it's very, a lot of me say, okay, this could do 19, paragraphs, or this could be 10 or 11, or whatever. It gives me, real context in terms of how that might be used and people would be affected or affected.
So there's no magic to the number.
Evelyn, do you? So,
Wait a minute,
wait.
I have forgotten mine.
Evelyn, do you have any thoughts on that spreadsheet and the discussion? Are you okay with these numbers?
I'm okay.
Right, sounds like we have consensus then on the numbers as presented.
Thank you, Ken.
You're welcome.
Thank you all for all your time and energy into this. It's been very helpful for us to nail down, and we have a path forward on developing a strategy, and we'll commit to getting that to you next year.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to, yeah, say thank you to you and Emily and Josh and the whole budget team, because, I know you all had to go back and do some work, last week too, so thank you for, bringing us something that sense.
All right, are there any other budget related questions or comments we may discuss tonight?
God bless y'all for putting all this together.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Matt?
It's not easy. At work, I manage and develop a budget every year that's roughly the size of our operational budget, which we don't have 100 staff. We do a lot of services and whatnot, but it just goes to show that we do a lot with that money every year. And so just very, very appreciative. I do have one suggestion. It's just an idea. Take it or leave it, come next year. But I was talking to a colleague, on the coast actually, of North Carolina, down near Wilmington, and she knocked me off my feet when she told me they had already adopted their budget, and it is 3 times the size of ours. And I thought, what magic do you have? But she was giving me some good ideas, and one of them was, one-on-one meetings with board members to go through the budget, to understand it, get feedback, both ways on things. And I think that could be potentially a good idea for commissioners that want to take staff up on that. I know Jen, you're remote, and so are you, Emily, so if it's a Zoom call, instead where, maybe with the budget team and others, commissioners and the mayor can kind of go through. Kind of like what I did with Jen earlier with the line item thing earlier tonight, before everyone got here, of just, better understanding the numbers, and providing some feedback. And I know this year, the budget didn't get out as early as y'all would have wanted, but it might be something that could be useful for those of us that want to really dig into numbers and save the rest of our colleagues going till midnight in doing so. So just some feedback might be good or helpful.
I actually like having the group because I find that I will go on my own, but when I hear things, it's like, oh, I hadn't thought of that. So I kind of like how we.
Well, I think it's just like more preparing for the budget meeting.
Okay, I got you.
And I think I heard along those lines, I forgot where I heard this or who told me this, but for community reinvestment funding, maybe we do that at the budget retreat. We do that earlier.
I actually would like us to have 2 retreats, because one would be, our normal retreat, but a second one would be on, if there was things with community reinvestment, and if not that, using that as some of our educational pieces and getting into some of the issues, like some of the things we're talking about, affordable housing or whatever. But I would like to see us do that as a second retreat.
I like that idea of taking some time at the retreat for the community investment funds. Because I think, if we can spend an hour there, 2 hours, whatever, we'll spend less at the budget workshop, because we've already kind of had that conversation and bringing most of it out.
So Matt Eford making notes on that as well as Emily, so thank you. Okay, any other comments? Emily, thank you.
Yeah, thank
We
you.
did it.
Appreciate the feedback.
Okay, moving on to committee updates and reports. Megan, we'll start with you.
So this past week, I had the UNRVA meeting, and I talked to Terry Hackett about the update to our board, and he's looking possibly in August to give an update. But over the last, since December, over the last, quarter, actually almost half a year now, there's been 20 meetings with work groups working on suggested draft for new rules to be submitted to the Environmental Management Commission. And they've been doing this work with the Division of Water Resources, and it's all different types of stakeholders together to write this draft. So that is the UNRVA. This last week I also had the TDA and the Orange County Arts Commission presented an opportunity to fund a performance space in the cloth mill. That is something that it's a space that has been a need in the area for a long time. And just is kind of working out that this might become available. It's not a done deal yet. The Board of County Commissioners are gonna have to approve it in possibly September to be the leaseholder of it. But the TDA has voted to fund some of the, or support some of the furniture. If this is to go through to kind of help the TDA make the case that this is really something that should be brought to Hillsborough. So that is what happened in the TDA. There was trivia night for a nonprofit showcase at the Rookery, but put on by the Alliance of Historic Hillsborough on Thursday night. My team did not win.
But my team did.
Yeah. And then this last Saturday, there was a cleanup in the Bellevue branch. And so we found a lot of stuff, fun stuff in there.
Oh, so that's what all the trash I've seen pulled out.
Yeah, on the side of the roads and stuff. So it was a good day. It was a nice day, at least to be in the water. So it wasn't miserable at all. And that's all I got.
Thank you. Rob.
I had a climate council meeting a couple of weeks ago and, it was really good. I felt really good. I mean, twice a year now, so, they're fairly packed, but, there's a presentation, from several UNC students of a campaign that they did, and it's based on taking, gas powered, things in our house, and when they quit, switching it to electricity. So the little campaign is, if you have a gas fryer and it dies, think about possibly electrifying that as opposed to continuing gas, dipping your stove,
Like you can do
water heater. And then also your landscape, equipment, so your lawnmowers and your blowers and your, so they're not asking people to, make that switch immediately, but when it quits, think about replacing it with something electric as opposed to gas. I thought it was very, very good presentation and trying not to, shame people into making that conversion, but when something needs to be replaced, to think about possibly using electricity as opposed to gas. And then there was another presentation, from Orange County, staff on extreme heat and, their campaign, that we should start seeing.
Yeah, I've seen a few things go out on that.
Because they're just starting it, but, every week they're putting out, various things on social media, on their website, through Everbridge. And so it's the heat action, plan and all the updates that they're gonna be doing throughout the summer. Where you can go for air conditioned space, where can you go to charge your phone for bathrooms or showers? And then as the heat gets, extreme, again, more cooling centers and where to find that. So that was really good too. And the last one was on, it was like a C-PACE presentation. I've never heard of C-PACE. You ever heard of that? It's a lending tool for having better borrowing rates for commercial buildings moving forward in the future. So I don't completely understand it. I'll share, slides with you also. You're kind of aware of it too. It's not for, obviously, everybody has to be, commercial builders, or commercial owners of a building, but it's a ways that they can get better, supposedly better rates over a longer period of time, whether for borrowing money for commercial stuff. And then we had a Parks and Recreation board meeting last month, and we just continued master plan for Riverwalk. We had a visitor who was interested, somebody came from Hillsborough Heights neighborhood, which we've never, I think, had somebody from that area, so.
Who was it?
I have to go back and,
They're a couple from Birmingham, from Alabama?
Now, it's a young woman, she's got a child, maybe, I don't know where she's from, I'm sure we didn't get that far. We didn't drill down that deep in terms of, but she's been in Hillsborough, I think, 3 or 4 years, and as a young child, and wants to, is ready to get involved a little bit more with her community. And then there's only actually one current female on board, so that's some additional. Additional.
Cool.
Do you have your youth seat filled?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there just one?
There's just one.
That's the ground sign, right?
Yeah, so we have a grandfather and stuff.
What's the age cutoff?
18, I think. It's 14, 18, 15. I have to double check. It's either 14 or 15, but 18. Yeah, we do. He's finishing up his driving. So I think he's finishing up his junior year of high school. This one, year at least.
I have just 2 things. One is, you all hopefully saw the email from, Matt Eford about, the application that we submitted to, Representative Fushi, for, projects, and this happened probably within 48 hours. We, realized the deadline, we got together a letter of support. We had something in the bag, we submitted it, and then we heard back that we have made a cut. Not guaranteed funding, but it looks real good, so, that would mean, I think 1.5 million possibly. Less that we would have to raise otherwise, so that's great, looking forward to hearing that. And then, I spoke at the Kiwanis Club, last week at their luncheon. And kind of shared what's going on with, Hillsborough, the budget process and traffic. I had questions about traffic. So that's it. Oh, so one more thing, and then we had, Matt and I had a Triangle West TPO meeting, this morning, regarding the evaluation of the executive director. So I can't go into.
Yeah, and I was gonna mostly defer on the TPO to Mayor Bell. I think, though it was all closed session, I think there's some good things to highlight from there. There really hadn't been a formal executive director evaluation process before, and some, things that we'll talk about in open session that's not related to personnel, but I think aligning things to our strategic plan for TPO and whatnot, and calling that out in our agendas would be really good. So I think it was a very productive and much shorter meeting than I was anticipating. I'll defer on Central Pines to Commissioner Ferguson, though we do meet tomorrow. Visitors Bureau had their meeting last week. One of the things that has come up as a concern is low ticket sales and concerns about ICE enforcement. Though there's been reassurances that won't happen. That's just really hard for people to stomach going to see a national team that they really love and grew up watching, and whether they're undocumented, documented US citizens going through the hassle and the harassment, potentially with checkpoints and that sort of thing. So that has come up, and we were talking about ways of reassuring the community and whatnot. I also last week attended the Polly Murray Awards. They did recognize Mayor Johnson at the end of the awards that the county did. Attended the Memorial Day event for the county with Commissioner Dara down at Chapel Hill. Fortunately, we couldn't be outside because of the rain. But that was a really good event, always is. Also attended the Alliance annual meeting with Commissioner Ferguson, who's on the board with me, representing two of our historic sites in town. Very quick meeting, but they get a lot done. It was really good to see all the good work that they're doing as part of the fiscal year wrap up. Attended the Home Builders Housing Summit that they have. They have two every year, so I'll send out some of the resources that they shared, including an economic study that the North Carolina Chamber of Commerce did on the gaps and what was surprising to me, and I think we're as a community contributing to it because of higher housing costs, is how many of our surrounding counties have no vacancy, which seems to be a good thing, except for when life happens, there's nowhere for people to go, divorces, families grown, whatnot, and it's really good to have 5 to 6% of your units vacant at any given time. That's what they said. It's just interesting how many, especially out western North Carolina, that there's just not, there's increasing population and just no vacancy. But in Orange County, allegedly, we have a good vacancy rate comparatively. Also attended the Green Tie Awards with the North Carolina League of Conservation Voters, which was really informative to attend and hear various perspectives about. And this is more for staff, and I should have mentioned it earlier. But when the county does the schedule of values or statement of values for revaluation, I really think we need to be mindful of that and present public comment. If we have to go, staff do their staff to staff thing. But I think that's where some of the heartburn is coming up for folks, is that part of the process folks weren't paying attention to. Then they get their revaluation notice and then they're starting to pay attention. And I think the tax administrator in a Chapel Borough article today said, well, yeah, it's kind of subjective, the values. And so I think we want to keep a really close eye on how the county does the revaluation. I think there's a difference between disparate impact and intentional impact, and I'm not using the right word, that things can be colorblind in a lot of ways, but still negatively affect folks. And then, I'm kind of cynical if appraisers who are in the business of helping sell homes are out there potentially, as part of this process, going up to a property and saying, it could be higher. That gives me some concern, because inevitably it might mean people get pushed out their homes. So I would like us to be mindful of that. And I feel like I'm channeling you with having a lot more updates, Commissioner Ferguson, but I do have two things to say just about what other colleagues said. Very glad for TDA with the performing arts space. That was a big priority for me when I was on the TDA, and it was for Kim Tresaro as well. So I'm glad to see that moving forward, and maybe a suggestion on the youth seat of maybe bumping that up to 21. People can still be in foster care up until 21 now, but also there's a lot of still young, and you're not really suddenly an adult.
But the age of majority is 18.
But I would like to maybe see that go up a little bit for youth representation. So some organizations I'm in use this 40. I don't know if I agree with that, but.
Well, I would like to see youth on all of our boards, because I think it's really important that we have youth and get them in younger and inspire service and community service in government and such. getting to see both staff and volunteer.
So, sorry to interrupt,
No.
but I think you'll, so at our Parks and Recreation meeting, we did have a Girl Scout group that was really interested in learning more about Parks and Recreation and decisions government. So they came and they stayed with us for about 45 minutes. But-
Yay.
Same one,
Cool.
same one as the one that reached out to us.
Don't think it was. I think it was a different one. So, but I was wondering the same thing that you guys said, she said it was a big.
I mean, I
Cause they
would,
were talking about doing a
Yeah.
player performance here or something, but I don't know, I'll find out.
I don't know, I'd like to see, I would love to see, between, fifth and especially between like fifth and tenth grade. I think optimal is getting kids on all of our boards. I'd also think a lot of fresh perspective. But be as that may, I'm glad, one at a time, but I still think that's something we should strive for. Yes, Central Pines does to meet tomorrow night. One of the things we're doing is 30 minutes prior to the meeting is some interesting talks. We had parking before. I don't remember what we're doing tomorrow night. I will be calling in because I will be on the road. Dad duty. He's holding his own. Good, which is, thank goodness. He's every day he's here, I'm grateful. We had, the partnership was meeting tonight, so, or last, anyway, I'm sorry, not tonight, it was last week, so I missed that one with our board meetings. Excuse me. The local reentry council, I will be attending that on Friday, this Friday, virtually. And, the Alliance, one of the nice things, so as I mentioned this board after City Vision and really seeing what Greenville has done with their African American Trail, I've talked to the Alliance about expanding ours, so I'm hopeful we can do that because we have not tapped our African American history in the trail. So I am cautiously optimistic that we can really expand and really showcase the history that's across our community and not just in downtown. And yes, my team did win the trivia.
Do you have a good name for your team?
It was a to try. It was not nearly as good as but it's what we could come up with on the fly.
What were your team names?
Oh, we were canned answers. We did not, neither of our teams won the best team name, but.
No. No, we knew ours was like, it was what we could come with on the fly. That's all we could say.
Sometimes the best ideas are at home.
However, my answers did rock. And that's all I got right now.
Good, thank you. Evelyn, do you have any updates?
Oh, I take that back. Sorry, I lied. So I will be going to Seattle. I'm leaving that next week for the National Association of Regional Councils. One of the things that I am disappointed that I'd hoped that we could do what the folks in Idaho could do with their development contracts, because apparently their legislature is even more brutal than ours on preemption. But they have the ability, they get everything done through development.
Development agreements.
Yep. They're, I call them the contracts, but yeah, absolutely. So their budgets for water, sewer, and a lot of infrastructure is actually fairly low because they load it all into the development agreements. And the mayor's like, it's really simple. You want to develop, then you're gonna pay for our community. So now my homework for myself is finding someone closer and seeing what they're doing. So I don't know yet, but I have found them very interesting. One, just hearing just some ideas to bring back, but also being able to share what we are able to do well. I think that's important. This is getting to spread the Hillsborough way. across and all of us banding together is how the heck can we collectively support healthy local governments? In the end, it's a whole lot of us, and when we stand together, we do better. So that's that. I'll let you know when I get back.
Thank you. Is that true?
Thank you.
Evelyn?
Well, the night that we had the joint public hearing, they had the fire department meeting. So I didn't go to that, and go to this booth, so this was more what I'm supposed to do, I guess, and the annual meeting will be in June, and I'm thinking it's the 17th, but I don't think that's right. I'll have to look at the calendar. But that will be interesting, because there are 3 new members, and it's like it was last time. They formed a posse and got who they wanted in, and who were really good members out. And it's a different board.
Sounds kind of horrible.
Look forward to hearing how that goes.
Yeah.
Well, but you know, last time. One who was elected didn't show, he came to the first meeting and didn't come to any more. So if you miss 3 in a row, you're off, so they got one of the ones who got knocked off back on, so. And he's a good one, so. If you had been a fireman, or had some experience with firefighting, you shouldn't be on that board. My father was a firefighter and I followed him. I knew what he was doing.
I thought you were about to tell us that you used to fight fires.
I was like going,
Well, I have to fight fires because he threw a mattress out. He and John Rennie Lynch threw a mattress out of the old Methodist parsonage years ago and inhaled asbestos and was in the hospital with pneumonia for over a month. So it's not an easy job. That was before they had the training in asbestos.
right.
So my mother said that she hoped he enjoyed the meeting because that was his last.
Thank you, Evelyn.
But I can't absorb asbestos, I'm sorry.
I'll leave that alone. Okay, is there any other business before the board?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Matt. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.